best place for below average Star Wars.
Hello there.
Welcome to the Star Wars show.
The best place for below average Star Wars.
I'm the Jolly Jedi Pete, and I'm joined by Katie and by Ste this week as we're going to deep dive review the Jedi Fallen Order comic book, Dark Temple. Katie, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Surviving lockdown 3 or whatever it is we're on now. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Obviously, lockdown 3 here in the UK, and we're surviving quite well. Lots of Star Wars to talk about. Ste, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good, mate. I'm keeping very busy.
I see you've been buying some Star Wars books recently.
I have, yeah. I'm actually at the moment. I'm reading Queen's Shadow. Let me grab it. I can't think who it's by. Hang on.
That's by E.K. Johnston, yeah?
Yes, yeah, that's it. It's on my bedside table there. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. Flying through it, actually. It's like I didn't realize how quickly I'm getting through it, but I'm trying to mind my pace because, as with anything Star Wars, I find that like I fly through it so quickly that I have to try and like moderate my pace, to really make sure that I'm like enjoying it, savoring the flavor almost, I guess.
Is that one of the YA books?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and I see there's loads. Actually, there's a load out, so there's plenty to be keeping me busy whenever I'm finished with this one.
Yeah, so did you say you're reading Queen's Shadow, yeah?
Yes, that's it, Queen Shadow. I think before today I'd only read Lost Stars by Claudia Gray, which was really good, but it's got a similar kind of vibe. So yeah, really enjoying it.
So E.K. Johnston's wrote a second one called Queen's Peril, I believe.
Oh, cool.
So you'll have to pick that one up next.
Absolutely, that's on the list now, mate. Thank you.
And E.K. Johnston also wrote the Ahsoka novel.
Do you know, I actually did see the Ahsoka novel, and I've actually got that on my list. I've got a big list of books, actually. But yeah, I can't remember where it was that I was looking now, but it wasn't available on the bookstore that I was looking to get it from. And I thought, I'll get that. I'll get that in time because, as I say, I've got so many things on the list at the moment. I'm just kind of in a place, where you've got so many books, but so little time between work and whatnot. So yeah, but I can't wait to get my hands on that because, well, Ahsoka.
And I think Katie's actually got my copy of Ahsoka. Is that right?
I do. It's sitting on my shelf right now looking at me, but it's still something I need to work my way through. Not quite got round to it yet.
You'll have to get it and read it when Steve gets his, and then we'll come back and review the Ahsoka novel.
Sounds like a plan.
Or you can ship it down to me, Katie.
Book club. Just post it out on the internet.
But we are here today to review Dark Temple, which was a 5-issue miniseries produced by Marvel Comics. And it is the prequel story to the video game Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. It's written by Matthew Rosenberg and the art is by Paolo Villanelli. I remember being at Star Wars Celebration when they announced sort of Jedi Fallen Order and had the panel there. And about how Lucasfilm Story Group were very excited to be working with Respawn Entertainment in not only sort of creating this story, but also having it sort of move into other mediums. And they didn't give too much away at that point. But obviously we did sort of see the sort of the Inquisitors move into the Vader comics, and the special stormtroopers created in the game, which I've forgotten the name of right now. The sort of the Inquisitor stormtroopers, what they're called, the Purge troopers. That's what they're called. Sort of the Purge troopers, who are like the captains who lead the Inquisitors troops. Like sort of they were brought in the Vader comics as well. And then so there was sort of subtle storytelling moving into other areas, and then obviously here we had finally the actual prequel story, sort of telling the story of Jedi Master
Cordova.
Cordova, yeah. And obviously Ste Junda, his apprentice. Obviously in the video game we get Cordova presented through a holographic diary that's stored inside BD1, and as you find more areas throughout the game, it sort of rejogs BD1's memory, and he plays more of these sort of audio clips from Cordova. And obviously Ste Junda is in the story as the lady who saves Cal Kestis and sets him on his journey to find the holocron, to find the Force sensitive children.
Yeah, I was what you were saying there about the Inquisitors as well and how they'd moved them over, and I think like the good thing about, or the thing a lot of people were excited about with Fallen Order, with the game and with the Dark Temple kind of prelude, was like the second sister, who like is kind of the main antagonist throughout Fallen Order, isn't really touched on him as much in the other things where you get to know about the other Inquisitors. So for her to be kind of take center stage and get what you do about her backstory in the game. There's not anything on her backstory in Dark Temple, but in the game there is really good. I liked how they pieced that together in a way that kind of gave her own bit of attention and made it about her without detracting from like the plot or like losing anything elsewhere. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, and then obviously the second Inquisitor, which I've forgotten what number. Is it the one you're fighting Kashyyyk?
7th, is it?
Seventh, yeah.
7th, yeah.
Obviously, in the Vader comic, you find out how the Seventh Sister loses her leg and stuff. So you sort of get a bit of her story in other mediums. But it's also one of those awesome things where you don't need it to understand what's happening in the video game.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have read it, it's like little golden nugget for you there.
It's added context. That's what I love about, when you have these stories in several different mediums, or like, well, even more than one different medium. Like it's just context laid upon context. And I think it's just, as somebody listening to the story, like it becomes a lot richer.
Certainly does. One of those things where I think like the Star Wars canon that's out there, so that's everything that connects into the movies. You should never need it to understand what's happening in a movie or TV show.
Mm-hmm.
But it should always be there to, if you have put the time and effort into sort of consuming the content, that you do get sort of the hidden pleasures of those golden nuggets when you find them. I think that's what the Star Wars canon does really well. Is that, like I said, these things, when you read them, ties in wonderfully, and it doesn't take anything away from the product it's tying into. So this doesn't take anything away from the video game, and you don't need it to understand the video game. But if you've sort of played the video game, then read this, it sort of connects in a way where like light bulbs go off as soon as you read it.
Mm-hmm. It just like
and
enhances your experience.
Yeah. So we'll start with issue number 1 first. Katie, do you want to give us a rundown of issue number 1, please?
Yeah, so first issue is called A Planet Divided, which I think kind of sets the scene not only for the rest of the 5-part story we get in Dark Temple, but also it's always kind of not necessarily a planet divided, but a galaxy divided is almost the like sum up Star Wars in 3 words: a galaxy divided. So I thought that was kind of like a nice kind of sum up of it all. It starts on the planet of Ontotho, and it's kind of present day, but it's obviously kind of in the build up to, well, not in the build up to, this bit has happened during the game, because you get to the end and you find out the second sister is looking for Ste Junda and Cal Kestis together. So obviously the first events of the game have occurred in order for them to be together. And I just want to like talk about the first page and the artwork on it. It's only 4 panels. There's only 3 speech bubbles, but it's just the artwork, as you say, Paolo Villanelli, is incredible, but also the colouring as well. So Arif Prianto, he's done an incredible job there. Like there's a shot of the second sister, and it's not from like front on, it's a little bit dipped below, but like there's an explosion behind her. It's very good, and I love that. But yeah, essentially what's happening here is you have the second sister turning up on Totho. She's very dissatisfied with what's happening. She's after something, and the stormtroopers who are there are very much, to her, they've not done their job. They've not done what she's asked. And you find she's looking for a temple. And they come across, the stormtroopers are saying, oh, there was a rumor about like there was a Jedi in there, and she's like, right, no, let's go get it sorted, essentially. And that part of the narrative stops there, and then we end up on a planet called Namil, and it says like years earlier, and this is where we first see Seri and Eno, and basically they're just sorting out a dispute between two different types of people, two different groups. We see Seri kind of force push the people away from each other to get them to stop arguing and stop fighting. And then after that, Eno takes one group of people and goes and talks with them. Seri takes the other group of people, and she tries to have this chat with them, but it ends up in kind of physical confrontation, which is something we see happen to Seri again and again throughout this process. And I think it's very interesting because it's very much, she is a Padawan here, and when we see her in the game, although she's not a Jedi Knight anymore and she's left that behind, you do see that growth. Like, she has grown as a person. She does have that self-control, and very much still has the carry-ins and the markings of a Jedi Knight in her. But yeah, so the first issue is kind of just them working out the dispute between those people, and it sets the scene. They get back to the Jedi Council on Coruscant, and I loved as well that Seri thinks she's basically going to get hung out to dry because she did make a mistake. But Eno, Jedi Master Eno Cordova, was like, no, like, yeah, okay, perhaps it could have been handled better, but we do get told to trust our judgment in the Force, and that's what Seri did, so you can't really tell her off for it. You then see them head to Ontotho, which is where, when we first see the second sister, she is in the future, and we see here that there is again a dispute being between two groups of people. Basically, the planet has just joined the Galactic Republic, and part of the planet was against that, so they're kind of on their own. But in that land is a temple that a private company wants to look at, and the people there, the Filari, are like, no, this is ours, you can't come and look at this, we're protecting it. There's an attack happens, and we see Seri and Eno get separated, and that is kind of the end point there, where we see that split, and Seri's knocked out. And there's a speech bubble saying, I hope you're right about her. So someone's saying, we hope she's good, we hope she's going to be on our side, and that's the end of a planet divided, the first part there.
Yeah, I think it was really cool to have sort of the, we see the Inquisitors, the second sister, on the hunt, and that's obviously set during the Age of Empire, after the fall of the Republic and the rise of the Sith, and obviously set during the time of the video game. So for those who played the video game, they're familiar with that character and the hunt. So again, it just sort of means if you never read a comic before, or you've played the video game and then you've heard this ties in, so you decide to buy this because you played the game, then you're reading this, it just makes those people feel at home straight away, which I thought was a really, really clever thing to do. As I love the tie-in from the moving from the Age of the Republic to the Age of the Empire, moving backwards and forwards. Again, it's a really good storytelling tool, sort of between the prequels and original trilogy timelines. I like the setting up of the Jedi Council, and how they're a bit worried to go and see the council in case they get in trouble. Again, it ties into a bit during this time period of all the Jedi Council too wrapped up in their own egos, and like Qui-Gon Jinn's beliefs that like perhaps they are, and it is, I'm going to do what I feel is right because I know that what I feel is right to me is what I feel is right, and doesn't tie into the Republic or any of the politics or anything like that. And sort of a similar feeling here. And obviously when they go there and they're worried about maybe getting in trouble, even though they've done what they felt was right, really. If that makes sense.
Yeah. As well, when it was all coming out, the game and everything, and obviously in the game it is revealed who the second sister is. But in the build-up, people were thinking it could be Barriss Offee, who, if you remember from Clone Wars, she's responsible for Ahsoka getting framed, isn't she? She's Unduli's Padawan, and she very much comes to see that the Jedi Order isn't what it at all should be. And she says that it's very corrupt, and she chooses to leave, and not just leave. Like, she bombs a Jedi temple, frames Ahsoka, and like then goes on the public thing of like Jedi Order's corrupt. So it is very much we know as well from watching Clone Wars that Ahsoka leaves, like, doesn't continue her path down the route as a Jedi because she believes that things aren't as they're meant to be, and this isn't what we're meant to be as Jedi. So I think that was quite an interesting part, and I love that they tied it in, because I do think, like, again, the Fallen Order as a title, like, yes, okay, it's an order that was destroyed, but also it had fell from what it was meant to be. It was, whilst there was still good Jedi trying to do the right things, it was in a way very much struggling with its identity and what it was meant to do as an order of Jedi. I think, I don't know if people agree or.
I think essentially as the Republic gets bigger and relies more and more on the Jedi, the Republic shouldn't rely on the Jedi. But because they rely on it more and more and more, the Jedi aren't going to turn around and go, no, we can't help you anymore. Like, do you know what I mean? And they get tied up in more and more political debate and more political actions through no fault of their own, really. Like, if anything, for not being able to say no, if that makes sense. It's almost like the Avengers, like, and like how they get caught up in there with the Sokovia Accords. And like, now you're going to follow what the UN tell you to do, and it's like Cap's like, no, I need to do what I think's right because people have agendas, and the Republic has agendas, and because the Jedi are the guardians of the Republic and get tied into it more and more and more, and that allows them not to sort of be themselves. If that makes sense. And it's something like Qui-Gon Jinn realizes, though, he says, you know what, here's the right thing. He's like, I'm going to stay, but I'm going to do things the way I think they are. And that's why he clashes with the council quite a bit. Obviously, I think with Barriss Offee, I think actually does sort of turn to the dark side. Obviously, Ahsoka just essentially leaves the Jedi Order to be a Jedi, if that makes sense.
And because I think that's why you see the conflict in Barriss and you see the conflict in Ahsoka about what the real mission is or what the real purpose is of the Jedi. Like, that's what kind of drives them to make that decision to no longer be Jedi. So it's almost like it's dramatic irony, isn't it, I guess?
It certainly is. What were your thoughts on this first issue, Steve?
I really enjoyed it. I think it sets the stage really well. And I think they do a really good job as well of setting her up as a Padawan. You can feel, I think they do a really good job of setting the scene of her being early on in her journey, in terms of the I guess almost immature feel that you often see in these early character journeys when they're really starting to learn about what it means to be a Jedi, and in particular conflict resolution, and that communication piece, I guess, in terms of like bringing the peace and bridging people. The part that Katie referenced there a little earlier about like the force push, and it all turns out to be a miscommunication between either side, the two parties that are kind of in conflict, and that's so often the case. And I know that I've said before, I think one of the reasons I really appreciate Star Wars is because it does such a great job of taking situations which appear in regular life and appear to be pretty complex, and applying it to this fictional universe and then breaking them down so they're pretty simple. It's almost like the producers do a fantastic job of simplifying the world as we see it and almost reframing things, I guess. I know that's a might be a bit of a deep answer to your question there, Pete. But yeah, I also really enjoyed the use of color, and I think that it feels like you can feel the heat. It's warm, and you have these these bright neon colors all the way through, like the reds and the blues and the greens, that really add like a lot of atmosphere to the scenes and to the shots that you see in the panels. So yeah, and I think, as I say, I think it's a really great job of kind of laying the foundations and setting the characters up too.
Yeah, definitely. I think like agree with everything you've said there, and I think on a deep level, I think like Star Wars is on such a deep level, but it's also done in such a human way that it's like you can connect to it straight away without too much information, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so moving on, obviously issue number 2 out of the 5, trapped on Totho. Katie, do you want to give us a rundown of what happens in issue 2?
Yeah, so again, it starts in kind of what is the present day of this comic. They again thought they had someone in the wreckage. They thought there was a Jedi there. The second sister's like, yeah, I'll deal with this. And you get in there. She realizes very quickly it's not a Jedi as such. It's someone with a lightsaber. It is a blue blade. And I did wonder if it was Eno's, when like in the handle drawings for me, they're not, because obviously they're action shots. It's not a clear shot of a handle, so I don't want to go out on a limb and say it is or it isn't. But it is. The woman wielding the lightsaber is Nirani, who becomes a main part of this story and is introduced in this second part. But just obviously a lot older because time has passed. Obviously we've had the fall of the Republic in this time, and the kind of the rise of the Empire. So like we see that happening, that confrontation between the second sister and Nirali. Nirali is killed. The second sister kills her off and continues to look for the whatever it is she is seeking in this temple. That bit ends with Nirali on the floor, and on the next page we see Seri Junda waking up off the floor. So there's kind of a nice little parallel there. There's a little droid, well, not little, like human sized, but N3Lo, who I actually love because N3Lo is very awkward, and has not grasped. How would I say it? Speaking with tact, they just say whatever. Seri breaks her way out the cell with a lightsaber, and she's like, "Why have you trapped me?" Everything. And Nirali, who you then meet, is like, "Well, did you try the door?" And the door was actually open. Seri wasn't trapped. And again, it's about your interpretation of how you see things. So if we look back to the conflict before, it was very much how Seri saw things. She assumed one thing, and this whole process, this whole story here, is kind of almost Seri's journey to not accepting what it is she sees first time and to thinking more about things. So we get some moments between Nirali and Seri. We see Phylor, which is the Phylori people are the people who said we don't want to join the Galactic Republic. And you find out that the attack wasn't done by the Phylorians as Dar Industries said it was. It was they believe it was carried out by people working for Dar. They believe it was almost kind of a false flag, so that the Ontotho government would say, well, we can attack Phylori. You see lovely moments with Seri talking with the Force-sensitive children, and there is a lot of Force here. And she said in a previous issue, there's almost like it's not that it's not there. It's not that you can hear nothing. It's that you can hear everything. So there is a lot of Force. And they get to a temple, which is what all this has been over so far. And you see statues of the Zeffo, which if you've watched the game, we see them in the Bogano vault, and things like that. And it goes on, introduces the temple. She goes to the city the next day because she wants to get in contact with the Jedi. She sneaks in, sees that the guy from Dar Industries is trying to say to them, right, well, we need to kind of launch an attack. The Phylori have done this. And she actually jumps in and says, actually, it wasn't the Phylori that did this. They were wearing your company clothes. This was a false flag attack. And he doesn't announce. She's been told at this point Eno is dead. So she's like trying to stop these things happening. And basically, they say, "Oh, she's a young girl." Basically, they're saying they don't believe her because she's young and she's a girl, so she must be sick. She can't know what she's talking about. And they try to take her captive with some droids, which obviously was not going to work out well when Seri is a Jedi, but B still had a lightsaber with her. So she escapes that. Her and N3 escape out, and buy some time for them to escape to Phylor. And then they come up with a plan, and they're trying to save that Phylor and save the temple, and that's issue 2, trapped on Tothel.
I think for me, probably like this was one of my favorite moments in the book was when you see the Zeffo statue. I think like the game, I love the idea of the Zeffo and learning about them through the recordings of Cordova. Obviously, we still don't get a lot about them, but it's like, were these a race of force sensitive beings from eons ago, maybe millions of years ago? And like, what happened to them and where did they go? Obviously, in the game, you get the idea of like the 3 different sages, and there's like a dark side one, for example, when he's the one on Dathomir when you go to his temple on Dathomir and stuff, and how it's very much yin and yang, the Force, light side and the dark side, and were these maybe the Force used as pre-Jedi in Sith. So as soon as I saw the statues of the Zeffo, like I was like, my ears sort of perked up, light bulb went off. I was like, oh my god, yes. Are we going to get more about these Zeffo? Because I'm really, really intrigued by the Zeffo. Obviously, didn't dive too much into it here, but just seeing them there was enough to get me sort of really excited for it. I love the idea of sort of the Dark Corporation trying to sort of set things up, sort of against the Phylari, making it look like the Phylari done an attack just because they want to get access to the sort of Phylari lands. Feeling like the old American West to it as well, sort of framing Native American tribes for things, just so you can sort of take the land and things like that. Which are sort of real world issues. And I liked how they become separated, how Eno and Sierra become separated again. Which again we're going to see Sierra having to learn to be on her own again, maybe make different decisions from the ones she's made in the past. Maybe try and be calmer. As you said before, like when she's in that room and she thinks she's been locked up, but she actually hasn't. It's a case of taking your time before you come to a conclusion. Again, reminds me of Qui-Gon Jinn when he's many times in his career, but when he's fighting Maul and he gets cut off from Maul and he's cut off from Obi-Wan, Maul's like very tense and pacing backwards and forwards, and Qui-Gon just sort of kneels down and meditates. He's just taking the situation in, keeping calm. So that reminded me of sort of that side of the Force. Obviously, Qui-Gon being sort of the type of Jedi should aspire to be, and obviously Sierra sort of doing the opposite here. Sort of again, Sierra's a Padawan and she's going to learn from these mistakes as she goes on. Steve, what were your thoughts on the second issue?
Well, you've just framed that part there about when she wakes up in the cell and she misunderstands the situation. And I wanted to touch on that as well, actually, because I think she's asked to examine the situation there. She obviously gets out of the cell using a lightsaber, and then she makes the point of you locked, I haven't got it with me right now, but it's you locked me in the cell or whatnot. And she's told to try the cell door, and that's obviously when she sees that the cell door was unlocked and whatnot. And I think rather than just saying you misunderstood the situation, it makes you consider what further considering a situation can have on the consequence, if that makes sense. In this situation, there isn't any real consequence, but you may be put in a situation where if you don't fully investigate, I don't know, whatever your findings are before you arrive at a conclusion, that there could potentially be a consequence of that. And that's obviously everything that the Jedi stand for, is being mindful and stepping back to consider any decisions that you make, or all the information that you have inside of you, or sorry, available to you to figure out whether things are as they seem. And I think that's something that is often returned upon, right? That idea of are things as they seem. And we know that all too often, whether it be in real life, whether it be in the Star Wars universe or any other fictional universe, things often aren't quite as they seem. And I think it's a really nice, I think it's a really great scene to kind of set that idea up and plant that seed. Like, it's explicit, but it could also be quite subtle. But I've kind of zoomed in on that, I guess. Um, and Freelo as well, the droid. Like, yeah, like Katie said, I really enjoy the characterization, the way that the droid speaks. The character really comes through, and that kind of lack of tact, as Katie put it, is quite amusing. Obviously, as you see, as you move through, which I think is always nice to have a character who just adds a little bit of light, a bit of a lighter touch, I guess, especially when you have those scenes that are a little bit more serious or kind of I don't know, hard hitting, I guess. So yeah, again, very much like the first one. Really enjoyed it.
No, definitely. I think another thing as well is that with the first one being such a good setup to sort of where these characters are in sort of this timeline, then this second episode was a bit like, or second issue, sorry, was now we're going to give you sort of tease you more, and we're going to show you that sort of that Zeffo link, and we're going to show you this conflict starting to brew on this planet. So we've had our introductions, and now we're starting to get into sort of the meat of the story, which was really good. Not taking too long to get into. Moving on to issue number 3, which is a fragile piece. Katie, do you want to give us a rundown of a fragile piece, issue 3?
Yeah, sure. Just quickly though, like the bit with the cell door where she like slices it open and she's like it was open. I think it kind of gives the when I went back. So like I read it again today, and I'd read it when we first got it months ago, but I read it again today, and I was like, oh, that just made like nothing was as it seemed. Like even when you thought, oh, this was an inside job and Dar have done this, like there's a twist, and it just kind of cemented that nothing was going to be as you thought it would be. Part 3 starts again with the kind of present day story on Totho with the second sister. We see Fess, a character who we get introduced to in part 2, the previous part, coming out and saying defend Phylar. He then unfortunately gets killed by the second sister. She's just tossing them aside. And she finds the entrance to the temple. It's really important to note here that like the whole place is like rubble and wreckage. And at this point you think, oh, this is what the Empire have just done when they've just got here. But anyway, she finds the entrance to the temple, and then as she finds it, it cuts back to on Totho years earlier. And what you see is, again, it's the parallel of the Dar Corporation have just found the temple as well. But when they get there, waiting for them is Seri Junda on the steps meditating. A bit like Qui-Gon was, actually. So they're moving towards the temple. She's there. Seri is simply saying, look, it's not your land. You shouldn't be here. You need to leave this. Go in peace. And they're like, no, we can do this. We've got a contract. We've got an agreement with the government, with the Republic. We can do this. And then she's like, please leave this independent nation. And they're like, this is the Jedi who attacked the city, open fire. The Phylarians then defend themselves and they come back to the village. So it doesn't show the fight as such, but they come back to the village. And what happens next is, again, you see Seri with the Force sensitive children, which is really lovely. But that kind of missensed piece, because it was a trap. The Dar Corporation had put trackers on the robots, so they brought back scrap and salvage. Scrap and salvage, and brought them back. But Seri makes a very clear point, like, you kill the droids, you don't hurt like the people, you don't kill them. So I think it's mentioned either in this or the next issue where the Dar Corporation are like, how many did you lose? And they're like, oh, we lost no people, it was just the droids. But at the Ontoto border, where the guy who runs the Dark Corporation is, Seri comes through. She finds them there. The Fylorians have decided to attack, and actually, she comes through. She tries to make a deal with him and make him understand. And she gets a deal with him. Then she goes back to make a deal with the Fylorians. But actually, she is met by Eno. And you see that Eno Cordova is there, and he's saying, "Oh, it was the Fylorian." She's saying, "No, it was the Dark Corporation." And again, we're back to that where we were in the first issue, where it was like the he said, she said between the two groups. But they both agree to make peace. So they go off with their separate groups. They come back, they make peace, and the issue ends with Seri and Eno off to explore the temple, or rather, Eno is off to explore the temple. He has asked Seri to kind of remain guard outside, and that's the third issue there.
What were your thoughts on the third issue, Steve?
Yeah, I thought I did think Eno was like gone until his little his reintroduction, I guess, like his reveal almost when we find out that he's still living. And of course that's they discussed that that's down to the Force being so strong there, as we established earlier, where at first they think that there's no Force around them, but actually it's just that the planet is so Force strong, I guess is how you phrase it, that it's almost like overwhelming, I guess, to their senses, which is why they're unable to kind of locate or like sense each other. I thought it was quite interesting that, I might be getting a little bit ahead here, but I feel as though it's Sia, it is like directing the conflict a little bit. I think like when the Fylorians get attacked, and she actually just orders them to defend themselves in that instance, and as Katie just said there, she very much preaches, don't kill any of the other people. We're only aiming to kind of damage or disarm the droids. I think it's a little bit later actually that comes, I feel like they're a little bit more involved with directing the conflict as opposed to the original mission of like peacekeeping, I suppose. But yeah, I think in this issue is where I was reading it and I was thinking, where's this going? As I say, towards the end, I wasn't expecting to be still alive. So yeah, this is where my kind of interest peaked, I guess, in terms of where's this going? Where is this overall story arch leading us to?
Yeah, I think one of the things I loved about this was I loved the way Eno was brought back in and sort of brought back as a sort of not a threat, but as a sort of an opposing side to Sierra.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of seeing again sort of those guys. I wouldn't want to use the word clash, but like they're almost clashing a bit here. But sort of in a polite way, and they do respect each other. We're obviously trying to figure out the truth that's sort of in amongst this political mess that's going on at the minute. Which again sort of setting the tone for like, soon there'll be a clone war, and that's a political mess, and you kind of tell what's right or wrong in that because there's that many intertwining lies. Like you don't know what's what. And it's sort of similar here on a smaller scale. But they say Star Wars is poetry, and here it's a bit like, sort of the hinting that like the themes here are going to become even bigger later on a galaxy-wide level, and it's essentially going to prove the downfall of the Jedi, the end of the Age of the Republic, and the sort of the rise of the Age of the Empire, which is the age we see in this book when we see the Inquisitors and the Second Sister on the hunt. Again, sort of, I loved the sort of the Sierra and the Eno sort of, I wouldn't say fight, but like sort of them being on different sides here, and they're trying to piece together what's going on. But like again, my favorite thing was sort of the Age of Empire stuff, where sort of you see the Inquisitor on the hunt for clues in the ruins of Phylor, and it's just like, oh, are we going to get a little taste of Zeffo here? Are we not? Obviously, they don't really reveal anything, but sort of teasing us with the idea that we might, which I thought was fantastic. And again, Katie, what you said about sort of the about Sierra sort of meditating similar to Qui-Gon Jinn. Again, it's not sort of, Star Wars is poetry and things are subtle and things are done for a reason. And I think that's sort of definitely the same there. So moving on to the next issue, Katie, do you want to give us a rundown, please?
Yeah, sure. So part 4 is a truce, a trap, and a traitor, because we love some alliteration. We're back in the present day storyline. They've made it into the temple. And unfortunately, we do see N3Lo's. I don't know. Is it a body if it's a droid? Remains, scrap. Sad times. R.I.P. N3Lo. We loved you. Again, they're looking. They've found some language. They're like, oh, what language is that? We can't understand it. There's a tiny bit of life left in N3Lo. And it's like N3Lo saying the structure is unstable. You've gotten us all killed. And she's asking who has gotten you all killed, and then N3Lo replies, who do you think? The ones who caused all this. And then it flicks back to on Totho, but it continues that bit of speech over and it says the Jedi. So we're back outside the temple. Eno's going in. Seri has been told to stay outside. Spoiler alert, Seri does not stay outside. Seri goes in to help out. Let me find the page. Sorry. Yeah, so her and N3Lo were outside. Then she goes in to help out because Dark Operation have kind of snuck in and they've tried to attack Eno, so she saved Eno, but ends up having to get saved by Eno. But the Dark Operation killed some Phylarians on their way in, so you do see, actually it is very shady behaviour. They were, Seri's side, you're starting to think Seri's side's right, like the Phylarians are right, the Dark Operation are the bad guys here. So they try to attack her. She ends up, this is when we see the Guardians of the Temple, who, if you've played the game, they are like the mini bosses. Well, actually, no, I'd say they are proper bosses in the temple because it's still quite early in the game. And they are horrific to kill. The first time you try to do it, you have to kind of force pull or force push the ball in the center of them out and then attack them whilst to do that. They are very, very powerful. First time I saw them, I was like, what is that? That's incredible. Then I was very scared. But we see this huge fight go on. We see the Temple Guardians. We see Eno save Seri, and he doesn't have a goal, but he's very much, I asked you to do something. It was important that you did it. But he does say, I think I should learn from the compassion of my Padawan. But also, she needs to learn to not be so naive as to think that, things are always unrelated, that she needs to be able to see the links between things and see how these things join in together. And then we see the head of the Dark Corporation again try and come into the temple, and Seri is very much fighting on the same side as the Phylarians now. She actually comes in, there's a gorgeous full page spread of her jumping in, the fight scenes going all around, and she's saying freedom for Phylar. And we see Eno making notes on his data pad, which I forgot to say, that is what N3Lo was holding when the second sister found him. So we see that fight, we see Fess again, we see Norelli, and Norelli actually knocks out Eno. She says, I'm sorry, old man, but I can't let anything get in our way now. And that's the end of part 4, A Truce, a Trap, and a Traitor. And it's like what I said, nothing was as it seemed. I got to that bit and I was like, hang on, what? Who's the bad guy? I don't understand. But it was that bit, again, to the door, nothing's quite what it seems. Things are very different. The Force is clouding a lot of things, and it's hard in this situation to know what the right and wrong is. But I think an important point I do want to make as well is sometimes there's not necessarily a very clear-cut right and wrong. There is what you have to do, and sometimes it's I'm not saying we should all go and do bad things here, but sometimes there are difficult choices to be made and difficult things which you don't necessarily want to do. But when we're dealing with things like homelands being invaded and that type of thing, then sometimes there are things you see yourself doing that you never would have done before. But yeah, so that was part 4, A Truce, a Trap, and a Traitor, where things got spicy.
Was indeed the Triple T. Steve, how did you find the Triple T?
This is the issue in which, if I was going to summarize it, I'd say, short summary, little logline, I'd say it's all kicking off. So Katie, I really enjoy Katie's summaries, by the way, of these issues as we start them off. They're great. But yes, it's rife for conflict. It's all kicking off, and I really like it when you first see the Guardians come to life. I had a proper throwback to when I started playing the game for the first time, and the first time that you see them move in that really like rigid, robotic kind of way in the game, and because they're so huge in terms of like the scale, I remember the first time I played it, I was like, what's happening? Like, I was like, as they move towards you, and it's like, what do I do? Like, how do I like interact? Like, how do I beat this boss? And I think it's great how we are looking at a different medium here. Like, you've gone from playing an interactive game potentially, if you played the game beforehand, to seeing it in this like 2D medium, and I really enjoy just seeing that same character appear in a different medium. I don't know if I've done a very good job of articulating what it is that I'm trying to say here, but it's quite cool, I guess, having knowledge of the way that character would move or behave. I'm still talking about the Guardian here, like reading the issue. I could really like piece it together. I could like see it as I was reading through, which was great. So yeah, and then of course it ends on like a high there with, as Katie said, being knocked out. You're like, what's happened? It's a bit of like a plot twist again, I guess. So yeah, again, action's at its peak. It's kicking off.
Definitely, and I think sort of seeing the Guardian in action, I think the Zeffo could be, again, to say Star Wars is poetry and sort of it rhymes. The Zeffo could almost be sort of, I don't know, so like, if you look what happened to the Zeffo, so the Zeffo evolved on a planet of the same name, and they constructed many statues and relics dedicated to several Zeffo sages, and they're protected by the ancient, these sort of ancient automations known as the Tomb Guardians, and these could be the first droids. Like, you know what I mean? Like I said, like the Zeffo seem to go back like eons ago, like to time before the Jedi and the Sith. So like even before the High Republic, before the Old Republic, we could be talking like millions upon millions of years. And these automations, these Tomb Guardians, could be sort of the first droids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then again, sort of, and everyone who plays the game, has quite the way those things move, and the challenge they give you as a player, trying to defeat them. And then seeing them again here in comic form, it was a bit like, oh, right, I know what's going to happen here. I know what these guys can do. Sort of got your adrenaline going, didn't it, as soon as you've seen them? But yeah, I wouldn't obviously like the rise of the Zeffo and the fall of the Zeffo. I wonder if that could be seen as like a prelude to the rise and the fall of the Jedi. Maybe things happen again. Like, obviously, we don't know much about the Zeffo. Hopefully, we'll find out more as time goes on and we get more stories. But it'll be fascinating to find out just how the Zeffo's journey mirrors the Jedi's journey.
Mm-hmm. Well, they say history repeats itself, Pete, right?
Indeed, and I think like like if you sort of look at Luke Skywalker, and he tries to sort of rebuild the Jedi Order, and he tries to do it in a way that he he's learned how the Jedi did in the past, when perhaps he maybe should have rested more on his own beliefs. And obviously it leads to that mistake he makes with Ben Solo, which leads to the sort of end of that Jedi Temple and that training class that he was training. And it's a sort of similar mistake to what the Jedi made beforehand as well. So yeah, like it definitely is. And you talk about sort of leaving, sort of bury the past. Like you see Rey at the end of Rise of Skywalker sort of buries those lightsabers. And obviously we don't know what she does next, but if she is going to rebuild the Jedi Order, I assume she's going to do it. She'll honor the past, but she won't necessarily copy the past, if that makes sense. And maybe, like say, we don't know what happened with the Zeffo, but maybe if the Jedi did similar things to the Zeffo here, maybe it's sort of that parallel of, like if you repeat the things we did in the past, you're going to make the same mistakes we did. But let's have to wait till we find out more. Does anybody have any closing thoughts on issue 4 before we move on to issue 5?
Nope, I'm all good. Got it all out.
Same here.
So issue 5 is the 5th and final issue of this limited run. So sort of the finale of this season, almost. You could sort of class it as. So it is the collapse of all things. Quite a deep title right there. Katie, do you want to take us through issue 5, the collapse of all things?
Yes, sure. So we kind of pick up from where we left off. Actually, no, so all the other issues, the narrative's been you get like 2 to 3 pages of the present day story with the second sister first, and then you go into what's happening on Totho, when Seri and Eno are there. But this kind of flips the script, and we actually get Seri and Eno first for reasons which will become clear. So basically, the fights all kicked off in the previous one, because the Dark Corporation were attacking the temple. The Phylarians are fighting back, trying to defend their land, defend the temple. Seri is headed for the command center to talk to the guy in charge. And she confronts him. He kind of laughs things off, and then is like, "Yeah, we'll get to it, whatever." And it actually comes out that he goes, "Do you know, you were right. Sorry, let me find the exact things. You were right. You interrupted my lieutenants telling me that they finished their investigation. It was Dar's men attacked that caravan to begin this feud, in a sense. We hired local forces to work security for us, and it would seem some of the locals wanted a war so they could settle disputes that have existed long before you or I ever heard of this planet." And she was like, "So it was the Ontotholons?" And he was like, "No, we only hired Falari." So again, and to me, that doesn't get resolved in this. Maybe it does, and I'm just a bit too couldn't read between the lines to see it. But again, it's that kind of things aren't what they seem. There was always ulterior kind of motives at play, and very much the Force does cloud everything here, and it is hard to see the judgments people are making and why they're doing them. As he goes to talk about that, though, he is shot, and he's taken down by Nerali. Fess is there as well. But they are apprehended or kind of stopped by the arrival of Mace Windu, and a couple of other Jedi Knights, who have arrived. Luminara's there as well. So I know people originally thought that potentially the second sister had potential to be her former Padawan. And I guess because this came out, no, final issue was released after the game had came out, so that could have maybe fed into it for some people. They might have thought, "Oh my god, this is the case," and then it wasn't. But they're asking for Master Cordova. She's like, "He's in the temple, blah blah blah." They get him. They get trapped by Nerali. Again, lots of things kicking off here. Nerali is trying to defend the temple, defend the weapons in it, the power orbs that they're using. They are attacked by a Tomb Guardian, but they manage to use the Tomb Guardian to help them escape from the power orb they are being held in. And and we see things start to blow up. So the temple, the outside of the temple, the exterior bit, all gets destroyed. And this is the damage we see in the start of the previous issue when Fess is amongst the rubble. So we can see these are the events that led to things being like that. And you find that so N3 lures left behind Fess and Nerali, and like the rubble's collapsing, you don't know what happens to them. However, Seri saved Nerali, but the others were kind of left. And we obviously see them in the events we see with the second sister. So even though Seri saves them, they do end up dead by another hand. Seri takes it very hard that she wasn't able to save everyone, and that we failed them. She says we failed them all. And she's trying to comfort Angun. They wanted this war. There was nothing we could do to stop it, and we saved who we could. And she was, is that enough? And he says it never is, which I think kind of, the good Jedis will always think on, doing what they can to try and do better the next time. And then we get a lovely scene where we see Seri become a Jedi Knight, and a lovely moment of respect where, it's like, you're my equal now. I'm not your master. But we see that is off to kind of continue his studyings. So he says he's going to spend a lot of his time studying, and then hopefully get out and do some more adventure, which we see because we have the evidence of that. We know he does that because we get BD ones, holotapes, holologs, and then the last page is the flip back. It is the second sister finding the data pad, and she's like, this was Eno Cordova's, it belonged to a Jedi. His last entry is years old and it's incomplete, and he doesn't know what he discovered, but I do. And then she's like, we're heading to Bogano. And then she says, Seri Junda and Cal Kestis cannot hide from me forever. To be continued in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. And that's the end of it there. And I was like, oh, that was really good, wasn't it?
It was indeed. Steve, what's your thoughts on this final chapter of this story?
Well, I love how it closes out. Not only because it was so well reenacted by Katie there, but also just because I'm a big fan of loose ends being tied up whenever it comes to narrative, right? I know that we all are. But I really like the way where you're starting. You know what I mean? Like when you play the game, you know exactly where you're picking up from, which of course is the aim, obviously. But it's something that I really appreciate. And it's funny how you see this kind of repetition of the scene, where they are flying away, and she says you can see that Sia feels guilt that she's not being able to save everybody, and it's kind of a scene that we see play over and over again across many of the Star Wars stories. It's like it's a repeat, and it's different every time. It's the same story, but it's different every time. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that I enjoy Star Wars so much, is because it's familiar, but it's also different at the same time. So yeah, I did really enjoy this issue, just bringing everything to a close. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great issue.
Would you recommend this to someone? So, say if obviously video games sort of transcend more than just Star Wars fans, so there'll be sort of non-Star Wars fans who would have picked the game up and enjoyed it. Would you recommend sort of this series to somebody who's played the game?
Oh, I think definitely, just because, as I mentioned before, in terms of context, like, it's great if you, as you know, I actually only just, I say not discovered Star Wars, but I guess really got the chance to delve further into Star Wars in like the first lockdown, so around about a year ago now, I guess. But it really just enhances your experience of the narrative, because there is so much extra insight that you can layer on top of your knowledge, and enhances everything. It just makes everything even more interesting, and you can honestly spend, I don't know how many hours, like, researching all this stuff and how it ties into the rest of the canon and all that kind of stuff. But if you were somebody who just played the game, like, it's, there's, fair enough, there's five issues, but they're short. Like, it's not like you need to spend a lot of time and a lot of energy kind of investing into this stuff. It's a nice, easy, quick hit, and extends the story or the narrative that you already know. So yeah, Pete, absolutely.
And Katie, are you glad? Obviously, you played the video game. Are you glad you picked up this series to read?
I am, yes, after waiting 90 million years due to COVID, because obviously it came out as single issues, but I do tend to obviously wait for trade paperbacks, and we had our trade paperbacks on order for, it was meant to come out in like March last year, I think that was around the time. And it was like, I think it was the end of summer that I finally got them. It might have even been into September by the time they actually arrived. Obviously, COVID has hit lots of different things in lots of different ways, so it was unavoidable. And glad we got it in the end, but it was a long way, and I'm glad we did get it, and I'm glad I did read through, because it's like you said at the start, Pete. It's not so, like, you can survive having not read that. Like, it doesn't, like, the game's not lesser. If you've not read that, you can still fully enjoy the game and be like, oh, that was really good. I really enjoyed the story, blah blah blah. But if you do decide to read it, it does add to it. So yeah, and I think it's interesting as well. Obviously, Fallen Order is Cal's story, and that's right. That is Cal's story. It's how it's meant to be. We obviously do have other parts interacting in, but Seri is an interesting character. Because there are parts in the game where Cal's like, should I trust her? Should I not? And it's interesting to see this kind of growth she has to become the person she is. But obviously, I know we do get a look at kind of what happens to her in between Order 66 and where we find her in Jedi Fallen Order. But I would be interested in kind of another. It could be a comic, it could be a book, I don't mind. But another look at Seri and everything she does in that time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure when this story ends, but obviously, Sierra goes off to be a Jedi Knight and take on an apprentice of our own, and the Clone Wars happens, and Clone Wars is tragedy, and there's no way to win the Clone Wars. It is essentially the final Jedi trap, essentially. And once they get involved in that, and they don't get involved because they want to get involved in the war, they get involved because the Republic and all these systems are in trouble. But once they get involved in that war, that they've confirmed the fall of the Jedi, and it may take some years, and they won't realize till it's too late. But like, as soon as they get involved in that, is that they've cemented their fall. And it would be interesting to see what would have happened if that hadn't happened, and how would if the Clone Wars hadn't happened, in the Rise of the Sith hadn't happened, Sierra and her Padawan, wouldn't have had the outcome that they have. So it'd be interesting to see sort of how much time they have together before the start of the war, and then how that affects things. It's like Ahsoka says, like, Ahsoka becomes a Padawan during the war.
Yeah.
So really, all Ahsoka's known since becoming a Padawan is war.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not that's not a normal upbringing for a Jedi. But because of the time where she's made a Padawan, she's made a Padawan and sent off to Anakin, like during in the middle of the war, and she's sort of learning things that way. So sort of unprecedented times for these Jedi and the things they go through. I love the series. I love how it sort of dived into the characters of sort of give us more about Eno Cordova, and about how at the end of this story, he's like, I'm going to go and research these Zeffo more, because I'm very intrigued by them, which is how I feel about the Zeffo as well. I think I probably wanted maybe a bit more Zeffo in this book, but that's me being greedy because it wasn't advertised that way. it was advertised the way it is. You know, it's the story of Eno Cordova and the story of Ste Junda. So I'm hoping we get definitely more from this time period. Hopefully, I wouldn't mind sort of a Indiana Jones type series where we get Eno Cordova looking at all this Zeffo information. But again, like, so in the game, the Zeffo, we learn about the Zeffo in the video game. So it's quite a new thing, the Star Wars storyline. Even though they're probably the oldest thing in the Star Wars storyline, it actually only got introduced sort of in 2019. Which is again one of the awesome things about Star Wars, just when you think you know it all, something fresh comes along. And obviously in the game we learn that sort of the Zeffo have built temples on Bogano and Kashyyyk. And then here in this book we learn that they built one on Totho. So I'm wondering like where else there could be Zeffo temples, if there is any more. But again, it's sort of like this, like the Zeffo putting these temples on Kashyyyk, on Bogano, on Totho. Obviously, we discover the temples on Kashyyyk and Bogano. We discover the one on, like, in the video game. We discover the one on Totho in this series. And then millions of years later, sort of, once the Jedi have fallen, like we see sort of, if you watch Star Wars Rebels, for example, they're going and searching and finding these Jedi temples. And again, it's sort of like poetry of sort of the same things happening again. How do you guys feel about the Zeffo? Do you love it as much as I do, or am I a bit crazy?
You do love it, Pete.
I find... Go on, Katie.
I enjoy them, and I would like to know more about them, but I think I think they deserve their own thing, and Seri and Eno deserve their own thing. Like, there is enough. Do you know what I mean? Like, Star Wars has the fan base that it could put that out there, and it would be consumed by enough people to make it like viable. So I think yes, I would want that. But I'm glad if we ever get it, it'll be its own separate thing, as kind of like, as opposed to two things squished in together. That's my view.
Yeah, I think for me as well, like, having read those 5 issues, I'd probably like to go back and play through again and kind of observe that information, or be able to absorb that information a little bit more. Because I feel as though, for me, it was probably quite a while ago that I played it. There's probably a lot of information that was lost on me at the time, because I was so consumed, I guess, with the gameplay and whatnot else. So I think there's probably scope for me to go back and probably learn a little bit more than what I've currently, what's manifested itself, I guess, in my head in terms of like my current knowledge. Because obviously, there's so many layers. There's so much information that, as I say, there's probably a lot that was lost on me at the time. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think obviously one of the last things we know about the Zeffo, obviously we know that Kujiat, who is one of the Zeffo sages, who we believe is like a dark side one, he has his temple on Dathomir, which you visit in the game, and he's sort of orders a massacre type of thing against sort of rebels rising against them, who are saying like, like all this dark side stuff's not good. The Zeffo call the Force the life wind. And we sort of, after this event on Dathomir, where Kujiat sort of has this massacre, sort of facing extinction, the remnants of the Zeffo fled into the great unknown, hoping to finally find peace. And it's a bit like great unknown, obviously in Star Wars, that says to me straight away, like the unknown regions, which is sort of where the First Order, the last of the Empire, vanish into the unknown regions to build in secret the First Order. It's where possibly, well, in the unknown regions is where Exegol is, one of the Sith homeworlds as well. It's linked to Snoke as well, the Great Unknown. So sort of a lot of sort of uncertainty, but also a lot of like possible connections to things. Like, are the Zeffo connected to Exegol? Are they connected to Snoke? Are they connected to Palpatine out there? Who knows? But like, it would be awesome to find out, I think.
Definitely.
Agreed.
But that brings an end to our review of Dark Temple, the Marvel comic tie-in to the video game, Jedi Fallen Order. So, Katie, do you want to sum up your final thoughts on this series?
I really enjoyed it. As I say, I like that it was something that kind of it doesn't detract from gameplay, but it does add something to the story. I'd like to see more from Seri. I'd also like to know a bit more about and what went. Obviously, we kind of know in general what he went off to do, but kind of specifics would be good. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I liked it's kind of current. It's two timelines. I like how they paralleled. Really incredible work by the team behind it.
I think, if I remember correctly as well, again, I think Steve's right. We all need to go and replay the game for the lovely story details inside of it. But I'm sure there's a bit where Cordova's a bit like, while studying the Zeffo, sort of learns about the end of the Jedi. And I'm sure there's a bit where like, he rushes off to Coruscant to speak to the Jedi Council about it. We don't know what happens, but I'm assuming the Council probably don't listen. I think he's a madman. But I mean, interesting to play through and actually see how that comes off. Like listening to that again, but I'm sure there's a bit where like he sort of, by studying the Zeffo, he sort of learns about the possibilities of what could happen with the sort of fall of the Republic. Do you remember that or not?
I don't. So when I played it, I tried to play it first off, but I was very short on time. At the time, so I was playing an hour here and there, and I lost the plot very easily. So I stopped and then started again and did it all in a weekend, but really whizzed through it. But yeah, I think Steve could be in with a shout there to play through again.
Well, I think you definitely pick things up the second time through, and actually, obviously, with us completing it now, you'll have access to New Game Plus. I don't know if it's called New Game Plus across is that like a standard term? I don't know. But in any case, obviously, you can play it through again. I know that, like, for me, I also, like you, Katie, stepped away at some point. Anytime I watch any TV, anytime I read a book, anytime I do anything, I try to really stretch it out, as I say, just because, like, when I'm really enjoying something, I hate smashing right the way through it and then it being over in like a weekend or whatever it is. And so that was one of the things I took a big break from for quite a while and then ended up going back to. But in that time, I'd started watching Clone Wars. I'd done a lot more just kind of like independent research, I guess, about Dathomir. And when I went back to play the game, there were a lot of things that I understood because I had context on it that I just didn't have before. And now the fact that I've continued on that journey, like through Rebels and whatnot as well, like I've got a lot more knowledge about the entire universe than I did when I initially played. So I'm sure if I was to play through again now, there'd probably be a lot more that I would pick on that might have been, or pick up rather, that might have been slightly lost on me, I guess, the first time around. But same for me. I would definitely recommend that anybody who's played the game would go ahead and grab the copies and whatnot, because I do think it's definitely worth adding an extra layer to your experience, I guess, and just kind of enhancing any knowledge that you might already have. I think it would probably inspire a lot of people to play it through again. Like if you played it through once, you go away, read all that through, and then you probably go, oh, well, I'm not sure where some of this fits in, or like, I'm not sure where this reference is or whatnot. You probably play again and then notice things that you didn't see the first time around. So yeah, same as you, Katie. Like I'd absolutely recommend anybody who'd be interested in just learning a little bit more about the storyline and the origins would take a look at it.
Brilliant. Katie, where can the people find you on social media?
So my Twitter is, I think it's Festive Bake underscore. And it is a private account because it's exclusive content. But if you just drop a little request, I'm sure I'll accept it.
Good. And Steve, where can people find you on social media?
Actually, on a little Twitter hiatus at the moment, Pete. I am on Instagram as Ste Quayle, which is Quayle, as in STE for Ste. But yeah, I'm on a hiatus from Twitter at the moment. Might make a return soon, so I'll be sure to holler at you when I'm next active.
You should just create a new account, like just for like your Star Wars.
Yeah,
fandom.
I've actually been considering it, because there's a lot of things I think that you fall out of touch with. And I'm thinking maybe I should make an account and make it like specific to like certain interests. But I'm somebody who falls down the rabbit hole quite a bit, and I think actually that's why it's been good for me to spend a little bit of time away, because I'll sit down for like 30 seconds, have a scroll, and then there I am 4 days later, still scrolling. So yeah, it's the idea of taking a bit of time out.
You need to learn some self-control.
I know, like the Jedi, mate.
You need to be meditating like Qui-Gon and Seer. But no, thank you very much, guys, for coming on and helping me review the awesome comic book. It's been great to talk Star Wars with you guys. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on. Obviously, Steve, maybe we'll have to review those Amidala books.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Like, and as I say, I've not even finished that first book, Queen Shadow, just yet. But I'm towards the end of it now, and I am really enjoying it. I'd recommend it to anyone. Such an easy read. Like, you just fly right through it, and that's obviously because you say with it being a YA book, it's just really easy to just get through. So yeah, mate, absolutely down for it.
Fantastic. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining me. Listeners, thank you very much for listening. May the Force be with you all.
Hi, this is Savannah.
And this is Brian from the Dorky Diva Show.
And you're listening to Star Wars,
The best place for below average Star Wars.
Please follow us on Twitter at BorsStar. That's at BoresStar. And on Instagram and Facebook at Star Wars Podcast. You can also reach us on email at starwarspodcast@gmail.com. The Star Wars Show can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and wherever podcasts can be found. Please give us a like, subscribe, and don't forget to leave a 5-star review. May the Force be with you.